Can't park here without a permit. This is a handicapped space.
I'm aware. That's why my permit's right here.
I don't see it displayed in the car. Step out and show me or you getting a citation.
Step out? I'm in a chair, man. Look, blue tag, my name on the back. You want to scan it?
Anyone can hang one of those around their neck. You got
Yes,
ID
and
to
I don't
back
have
it
to
up?
prove anything unless
My
you have
legs.
You are watching a man sit in his car. He has just pulled into a handicapped parking space. A valid, state-issued handicapped placard hangs from his rearview mirror, clearly visible through the windshield. He has done nothing wrong. He has broken no law. He is not blocking traffic. He is not parked in the wrong space. He is in one of two designated accessible spaces directly in front of a small pharmacy called Greenleaf RX, and he has every legal right to be there. He reached for a prescription bag on the passenger seat. And in that exact moment, a police officer appeared at his window. The officer did not ask for his name. The officer did not ask if he needed help getting inside. The officer did not look at the placard and pause to verify it. The officer told him he was parked illegally. The man pointed to the placard. The officer told him it was not valid. This is where the story begins. Not with a crime. Not with a threat. Not with any act of aggression on the part of the man in the car. It begins with a man picking up his medication on a gray Tuesday morning in March, and a police officer who decided that was enough reason to stop him. The man's name is Marcus Elijah Reed. He was 53 years old when this happened. He lives in Decatur, Georgia, on a quiet residential street called Kellwood Lane. That morning, he had driven his silver Honda Odyssey to the strip mall off Flat Shoals Avenue where Greenleaf RX was located. It was a routine trip, the kind of errand that should take no more than 10 minutes. Pull in. Park in the accessible space. Walk inside or wheel inside. Hand over the insurance card. Pick up the prescription. Walk back out. Marcus Reed had made this trip before. He knew where the accessible spaces were. He knew how to navigate the pharmacy. He had done this dozens of times without incident. That morning was supposed to be no different. The placard on his dashboard was issued by the Georgia Department of Driver Services. It was valid. It was current. The registration number matched the state database. The expiration date was 11 months away. There was not a single irregularity on it. Not one detail that could be questioned, challenged, or disputed. It was exactly what it was supposed to be, a legitimate document granting Marcus Reed the legal right to park in an accessible space. And yet Officer Daniel Kessler stood at his window and told him otherwise. Marcus Reed responded calmly. He pointed to the placard again. He told Kessler that the placard had been issued by the Georgia Department of Driver Services just 6 months prior. Kessler did not acknowledge this. Kessler told Marcus Reed to move the vehicle immediately or face a tow and an arrest. Marcus Reed did not move. He was calm. He was not raising his voice. He was not making threats. He was simply asking the one question that any person in his position would ask. He asked Kessler to tell him the specific municipal code he was violating. He asked for the exact regulation that made his parking illegal. Kessler did not answer that question. He did not produce a code. He did not cite a statute. He did not explain his reasoning in any way that Marcus Reed could verify or challenge. Instead, Kessler picked up his radio and called for backup. Within minutes, a second officer arrived on the scene. Officer Patricia Duval. And what unfolded over the next 4 minutes would become the center of a federal lawsuit, a criminal investigation, and the permanent end of Daniel Kessler's law enforcement career. But at this point in the story, none of that had happened yet. At this point, it was still just a man in a parking lot being told he had done something wrong when every piece of evidence on his dashboard said he had not. It was still just an officer who refused to answer a direct question. It was still just a confrontation that, if no one had followed up, if no one had asked the right questions later, might have vanished entirely. No report was filed by Kessler that day. No documentation of the stop entered the Decatur Police Department system. To the department, the encounter did not exist. Marcus Reed was not a man who invited confrontation. He did not seek out trouble. He did not go looking for fights. His neighbors on Kellwood Lane described him as polite, reserved, and quiet. The kind of man who nodded when he passed you on the sidewalk and kept walking. The kind of man who did not make demands or draw attention to himself. In the way that many disabled veterans become invisible not by choice, but because the world around them was never built to accommodate who they are. Marcus Reed had faded into the background of his own neighborhood. But invisibility does not mean someone has nothing to lose. And it does not mean someone deserves to be treated as though they have done something wrong for simply existing in a public space. What Marcus Reed was, what Officer Kessler either did not know or did not care to find out, was a man who had already given this country more than most people will ever be asked to give. And that is where this story goes next. Marcus Elijah Reed spent 14 years serving in the United States Army. He did not talk about his service often. He was not the kind of man who wore it like armor or brought it up in casual conversation to earn respect or sympathy. It was a part of his life, a significant part, but it was something he carried quietly, the way many veterans do, folded inward where most people could not see it. Reed served in Afghanistan. He was deployed to Kandahar. It was there, on a road that looked like every other road he had driven down dozens of times before, that a roadside explosion changed everything. The blast shattered his left leg. The force of it damaged his spine in ways that would require multiple surgeries, years of painful rehabilitation, and a lifetime of managing chronic pain that never fully went away. When Reed finally came home, he came home to a body that no longer responded the way it once had. Most days he needed a wheelchair. The days he did not use one, every step was a fight, not with anyone else, but with the damage that had been done to him by a war he had volunteered to serve in. Reed was not bitter about it. At least, that is how his daughter described him. He had made peace with what happened to him in a way that surprised even the people closest to him. He did not dwell on it. He did not spend his mornings reliving the explosion or his afternoons consumed by anger at what had been taken from him. He focused on managing his health, staying close to the medical care he needed, and building a life that was manageable within the limits his body now imposed. 3 years before the incident at Greenleaf RX, Reed moved to Decatur, Georgia. The decision was not complicated. Decatur was quiet. It was close to the VA Medical Center on Memorial Drive, where Reed went regularly for treatment, follow-up appointments, and ongoing care related to his injuries. He was not looking for a vibrant social scene. He was not looking for excitement or novelty. He was looking for stability. A place where he could manage his condition without unnecessary stress and live out his days with something close to peace. He found a home on Kelwood Lane and settled in. His neighbors came to know him over time not as someone dramatic or demanding, but as a man who was simply there. He was polite when he encountered people. He did not cause disturbances. He kept his space clean. He was, in every observable way, an easy neighbor to have. But he was also largely invisible, the way many disabled veterans become invisible in communities that are not designed with them in mind. Not because he was unwelcoming, but because the world had a habit of looking right past people who did not fit neatly into its expectations of what a person should look like, move like, or occupy space like. His daughter, Simone Reed, lived in Atlanta. She worked as a paralegal. She called her father on a regular basis, checking in, making sure his appointments were on track, making sure his prescriptions were being filled, making sure he was not quietly letting something slide the way he sometimes did when things got difficult. Marcus Reed was not a man who asked for help easily. When something was hard, he absorbed it. He did not complain. Simone knew this. She also knew it meant that when her father did mention something, it was usually because it had already become a problem. Now, on the other side of this story, there was the man who stopped Marcus Reed that morning. Officer Daniel Kessler. Kessler was 38 years old. He was 6'2". He had been a patrol officer with the City of Decatur Police Department for 9 years. On the outside, Kessler looked like any other officer doing his job: routine stops, routine patrols, routine interactions with the public. That was how the department presented him. That was the version of Daniel Kessler that existed in public view. But there was another version. The version that existed in the department's own internal records. Over his 9 years on the force, Officer Daniel Kessler had accumulated 11 internal complaints. 11 documented instances where someone had raised a formal concern about his conduct. Not one of those 11 complaints had resulted in any formal discipline. Not a reprimand. Not a suspension. Not even a written warning that carried real weight. 2 of those complaints had been filed by Black residents of Decatur specifically. Both of those complaints had been dismissed quietly, without any public explanation or any indication that they had been taken seriously. The department had access to these records. They had seen the number climb from 1 complaint to 5, from 5 to 8, from 8 to 11. They had read the details. They knew who had filed them and why. And at no point did the department take action that would have prevented what happened to Marcus Reed on that Tuesday morning in March. This is the detail that matters most, not just what Kessler did in that parking lot, but the fact that the institution behind him had every opportunity to see the pattern forming and chose not to act on it. The complaints were there. The names were there. The dates were there. Everything a supervisor needed to ask serious questions about Officer Kessler's conduct was sitting in a filing system that no one appeared to review with any real scrutiny. Marcus Reed did not end up in that parking space by accident. He did not end up in a confrontation with Daniel Kessler because of bad luck or a misunderstanding. He ended up there because an officer with a documented history of problematic behavior was still on the streets, still making stops, and still operating with the full weight of his badge behind him because the department had let him. Officer Daniel Kessler ordered Marcus Reed out of the vehicle. He did not make it a request. He did not ask if Marcus Reed needed assistance. He told Marcus Reed to exit the car immediately. Marcus Reed explained, for the second time that morning, that he was a wheelchair-dependent disabled veteran. He explained that exiting the vehicle quickly was not something he could do without difficulty. His left leg had been reconstructed multiple times after an explosion in Kandahar. His spinal condition made sudden movements both painful and potentially dangerous. He was calm. He was not defiant. He was simply stating a fact about his body. Kessler did not wait for Marcus Reed to finish speaking. Kessler opened the driver's side door himself. Kessler reached across Marcus Reed's body and unclipped the seatbelt without asking permission, without giving warning, without giving Marcus Reed any chance to brace himself. Marcus Reed attempted to grab the steering wheel. He needed something to hold on to. His left leg could not bear his full weight without preparation. His spine required careful movement to avoid triggering severe pain. Kessler pulled Marcus Reed partially out of the vehicle while Marcus Reed was still trying to position himself, still trying to communicate that this was not safe. Marcus Reed fell. His body hit the asphalt. His left leg struck the pavement first. The leg that had been held together by pins and screws and surgical intervention. It made contact with the ground at an angle that sent a wave of pain through his entire body. His spinal condition flared. The pain was immediate and severe. Marcus Reed called out. He was not resisting. He was experiencing a medical emergency triggered by the force Kessler had used to remove him from the vehicle. Marcus Reed stopped moving. He lay on the asphalt and tried to manage the pain shooting through his leg and spine. Kessler handcuffed him. Marcus Reed was on the ground, in pain, unable to resist, and Kessler handcuffed him as though Marcus Reed posed some kind of threat. Officer Patricia Duval stood 12 feet away. She had watched the entire sequence. She had seen Kessler open the door, reach in and unclip the seatbelt, and pull Marcus Reed from the vehicle. She had seen Marcus Reed fall. She had heard Marcus Reed call out in pain. And Officer Patricia Duval said nothing. She did not intervene. She did not question Kessler's actions. She stood there and watched it happen. The entire interaction lasted under 5 minutes. 5 minutes that would later be examined by federal investigators, civil rights attorneys, and a criminal court. 5 minutes that would cost Daniel Kessler his career, his freedom, and his law enforcement certification. But at that moment in the parking lot of Greenleaf RX on a Tuesday morning in March, those 5 minutes were just another stop. Just another encounter that, if it had gone the way Kessler expected, would have disappeared into the silence of an unofficial incident that left no paper trail. Marcus Reed was released later that same morning. No charges were filed. No citation was issued. No arrest report was written. Kessler did not document the stop. The encounter did not appear in any official Decatur Police Department system. To the department, to anyone reviewing records later, to anyone asking whether Officer Kessler had stopped anyone that day, the answer would have been no. The encounter had not happened. Marcus Reed went home. He did not tell anyone what had happened. Not that day. Not the next day. Not for 11 days. He absorbed it the way he had absorbed so much else in his life, quietly, privately, without drawing attention to the harm that had been done. He managed the pain as best he could. He rested his leg. He tried to go about his routine. But something had changed. His leg was worse. The pain in his spine was worse. The injury was real, even if the record of how it happened did not exist. 11 days passed before Marcus Reed mentioned it to anyone. He was on the phone with his daughter, Simone. It was a routine call. She was checking in the way she always did. And Marcus Reed, almost in passing, mentioned the incident at the pharmacy. He did not make it sound like a big deal. A cop had stopped him. There had been a misunderstanding about his placard. Things had gotten physical. He had fallen. His leg was hurting more than usual. Simone Reed knew her father well enough to know that when he mentioned something like this in passing, it meant the situation was worse than he was letting on. She asked him whether he still had the placard with him at the time. Marcus Reed said yes. Simone Reed asked him whether he still had it now. Marcus Reed said yes. Simone Reed drove to Decatur that weekend. She examined the placard herself. She checked the registration number. She verified it against the Georgia Department of Driver Services database. The placard was valid. The registration matched. The expiration date was still 11 months away. There was nothing wrong with it. There had never been anything wrong with it. Officer Daniel Kessler had lied. He had fabricated the entire basis for the stop. He had told Marcus Reed that the placard was invalid when it was not. He had escalated a non-existent violation into a physical confrontation that left Marcus Reed injured and handcuffed on the pavement of a pharmacy parking lot. And he had done it knowing that if no one asked questions, if no one followed up, the lie would stand. Simone Reed did not let this go. She knew what her father would do if left to his own instincts. He would absorb it, move on, and never hold anyone accountable. That was how Marcus Reed had lived most of his life. But Simone Reed was not willing to let this disappear. She hired an attorney. His name was Jerome Whitfield. Whitfield was a civil rights lawyer based in Atlanta who had handled 3 prior cases involving Georgia law enforcement. He knew how these cases worked. He knew what to look for. And he knew that if Kessler had done this to Marcus Reed, there was a strong possibility he had done it to others. Whitfield filed a public records request with the Decatur Police Department. The request was specific. He wanted all documentation related to Officer Daniel Kessler's traffic stops, parking enforcement actions, and any internal complaints filed against him over the past 5 years. The department did not respond immediately. Whitfield followed up. The department delayed. Whitfield filed a court motion to compel the release of the records. 6 weeks after the initial request, the documents arrived. What those documents revealed was not a single incident. It was not an isolated mistake. It was a pattern. Between 2021 and 2024, Officer Daniel Kessler had initiated 11 traffic stops and 3 parking confrontations that resulted in 0 citations being formally processed. Not one of those 14 encounters had ended with any official paperwork entering the system. Not one had resulted in a ticket, a fine, or a formal charge. They had all simply stopped. They had all ended without any record that they had ever begun. In 9 of those 11 traffic stops, the driver had been black. In 4 of those cases, drivers had later reported to friends, to family, to community members that Kessler had cited violations that did not exist. He had claimed registration issues that were not real. He had invented expired permits. He had fabricated municipal code violations that no one could verify because they did not exist in the code at all. But none of those drivers had pursued formal complaints. None of them had known at the time that the citations were fraudulent. None of them had realized they could challenge what had happened. They had simply driven away, shaken and confused, wondering what they had done wrong. The department had never audited Kessler's stops. The department had never cross-referenced his citations against the municipal code to verify that the violations he was claiming were real. The department had never reviewed the body camera footage from these encounters to determine whether Kessler's actions were consistent with department policy. The department had simply allowed it to continue. For years. Across multiple stops. Across multiple complaints. Across a pattern that was visible to anyone who looked closely enough. Kessler had not made a mistake with Marcus Reed. Kessler had executed a routine. He had done what he had been doing for years, stopping someone, fabricating a violation, escalating the encounter, and then walking away without ever filing the paperwork that would create a record of what had actually happened. The only difference with Marcus Reed was that this time, someone followed up. This time, someone asked questions. This time, someone refused to let it disappear. Jerome Whitfield filed a federal civil rights lawsuit in the Northern District of Georgia. The lawsuit named Officer Daniel Kessler individually and the city of Decatur as a defendant for its failure to supervise Kessler despite years of documented complaints. The lawsuit detailed the medical injuries Marcus Reed had sustained: a refracture of the left tibia and aggravation of his spinal condition requiring surgery and months of rehabilitation. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation opened a parallel criminal inquiry after Whitfield's findings were reported by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The GBI reviewed the body camera footage. Kessler had not activated his own camera during the encounter. That was a violation of policy. But Officer Patricia Duvall's camera had been running. It had captured Kessler opening the door, reaching in and unclipping the seatbelt, and Marcus Reed falling. It had captured Marcus Reed on the ground, calling out in pain. It had captured Kessler handcuffing him. The footage confirmed the sequence of events exactly as Marcus Reed had described them. It left no room for ambiguity. It left no room for Kessler to claim that Marcus Reed had been aggressive, that Marcus Reed had resisted, or that the force Kessler used had been necessary. The footage showed what had actually happened: an officer removing a disabled man from a vehicle without legal cause, without any justification, and without any regard for the man's physical condition or safety. Kessler was indicted on 2 charges. Assault under color of law. Filing a false police report. Both were federal charges. Both carried significant penalties. Kessler was suspended without pay pending trial. The Decatur Police Department issued a brief statement acknowledging the indictment and stating that the matter was under review. The civil case settled out of court for $750,000. The settlement included no admission of guilt by the city of Decatur, but the city agreed to implement mandatory auditing of all officer-issued citations moving forward. The city also agreed to fund an independent review of Officer Daniel Kessler's entire case history dating back to 2019. Every stop, every citation, every encounter that had been documented or left undocumented would be examined. The criminal trial began 4 months after the indictment. Kessler's defense attorney argued that the force used had been necessary. He argued that Marcus Reed had been uncooperative. The prosecution presented the body camera footage. The prosecution presented the placard that had been verified as valid. The prosecution presented medical records showing the extent of the injuries Marcus Reed had sustained. The prosecution presented testimony from drivers who had been stopped by Kessler in prior years and told that their documents were invalid when they were not. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Kessler was convicted on both charges. Assault under color of law. Filing a false police report. The judge sentenced him to 26 months in federal prison. Kessler's law enforcement certification was permanently revoked. He would never work as a police officer again. Officer Patricia Duvall, who had stood 12 feet away and said nothing while Marcus Reed was pulled from his vehicle and handcuffed on the pavement, was not charged with any crime. She was not disciplined by the department. She remained on active duty. Marcus Reed's surgery was covered in full by the settlement. The operation took place at the VA Medical Center on Memorial Drive. The surgeon who performed it told Marcus Reed that the refracture had been severe. The recovery would take months. Marcus Reed listened and nodded. He had been through this before. The rehabilitation took 8 months. Marcus Reed attended physical therapy twice a week. He worked on rebuilding strength in his left leg. He managed the pain in his spine with the same quiet determination he had managed everything else in his life. By the time the rehabilitation ended, Marcus Reed was able to move with slightly more ease than he had before the injury. But he was not the same. The damage was permanent. Marcus Reed did not give interviews. He did not appear on television. He did not write op-eds or give speeches about what had happened to him. When reporters contacted him, he declined to comment. This was not because Marcus Reed did not care about justice. It was because Marcus Reed had never been the kind of man who sought attention or validation from strangers. Simone Reed read the settlement amount aloud to her father during a phone call. Marcus Reed was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that Simone would later repeat to Jerome Whitfield, who would repeat it to a reporter, who would include it in an article that ran in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution 3 weeks after the trial ended. Marcus Reed said, "I was not trying to win anything. I was just trying to pick up my prescription." That sentence became the closing line of the article. It was shared thousands of times. It was quoted in opinion pieces and discussed on podcasts and referenced in conversations about police accountability and disability rights and the quiet violence that happens in parking lots when no one is watching. But Marcus Reed did not read any of those pieces. He did not follow the coverage. He did not engage with the public conversation that his case had sparked. As of the most recent court filings, Marcus Reed continues to live on Kelwood Lane in Decatur, Georgia. He continues to go to his appointments at the VA Medical Center. He continues to manage his pain. He continues to live his life the way he has always lived it, quietly, privately, without asking for anything from anyone. But the question his case raised has not gone away. It lingers in every similar encounter that happens somewhere else, in some other parking lot, with some other officer who has been allowed to continue despite complaints, despite patterns, despite every warning sign that should have been enough. How many people without a Simone Reed never get justice? How many people without a Jerome Whitfield never get their case heard? How many people without body camera footage never get believed? How many people are told their documents are invalid when they are not? And how many of them simply drive away because they do not know they can fight back? And how many times does a department ignore the complaints, dismiss the warnings, and allow an officer to keep doing what Daniel Kessler did until someone finally asks the right questions?